what I found in brooding, in that place where you are engaging with God's desires and his intentions, and that is beginning to shape your desires and intentions to come into a resonant agreement, you are then vibrating effectively with that frequency of his desire. You then become his voice. So then when you speak, you're speaking with the authority of his voice. That means you have that creative power to call that into being, to birth it, manifest it, whatever it might be, because now everything recognizes your voice as his voice. Yeah, because you are speaking with full authority of working his heart, expressing it. And I would, symbolically for me, when I had brooded and I felt like I'm energized by his intentions, and I really feel, compelled sometimes to how do I sort of now follow this through? For me, waterfalls were always a quite an important part of my journey, and I would go and engage the sound of many waters, which is his voice. Is like the sound of many waters. So I'd go and stand under this waterfall, and I would allow myself to be completely saturated in the sound of many waters. And then behind that waterfall, there was this cave, which was a chamber that I began to outwork destiny from. And I met Enoch there. He directed me in particular quests to do. So it fit for me, and this is just for me, and I'm not saying this is everyone has to do it the same way. For me, it's like I brood within the cradle of life, within something that is sort of beginning to come into a life, and I become the vehicle of that then coming into life. I then affirm that by sort of being his voice, and I do that in the waterfall. I go into that chamber, and I then seek, how is this in line with who I am? Because I don't want to do things just because I could do them, or even if God had given me this and you now have the authority to do this, I don't want to do that in any way which is out of sync with who I am. So that chamber of destiny is like, this is where I begin to find how I can express his voice creatively through who I am, rather than through a technique or through a formula. I go there and it almost creativity is birthed in me of how I'm going to do this, because I don't always just call things into being, or I do things in different ways. And often then, once I'd been in there and I felt, now I can work this in a creative way, I go into the chamber of creation, and I then engage with light. So the living light quantum lumens, which form all reality, they are going to be the manifestation of reality out of the desire that I'm about to birth. So now, I don't think you have to do all of that physically or go to all of those places. But for me, it's a mental checklist of going through this creative process, ensuring that I'm in line. And then when I do speak, and I could call forth, or I could decree or declare, then that light is living, energized, waiting to be directed into a particular reality. And sometimes, if it's a larger shift in reality, then I could go there with other people, and we would be in agreement over what we were calling forth, rather than me just doing it individually. Now, I can call forth around my life. I can call forth in the spheres that I have authority in. But sometimes if I want something global to change, it isn't just going to happen necessarily if I just say change. You know, sometimes there's power in the agreement, but when you come together in agreement, then you have a multiplied effect, if you like. So for me, the process was one that I learned, and it helps me to ensure that I follow the desire of God through in a creative way, but not in a way which is me trying to make something happen. Or yeah, I feel the process for me gives me checks and balances along the way to ensure that what I'm outworking is God's heart. Now, once I engaged a group of guardians in a council and they asked me to create some more guardians, I had not brooded in the Father's heart, and I had not in any way come into agreement with that. So it was like I was a bit circumspect of, I'm not sure about that. So I just said, well, I'm going to go and check it out. I'm not just taking your word for it, basically. Not that I said that, but I thought it. So it was like, okay. So I went to the Father and I said, look, I've been asked. And he said, yeah, I know. So my first question is, well, why is there a deficit of guardians? And then he basically said, well, because we have left quite a number of things for you to complete. Not me personally, but us to complete. And this was one thing that I was part of completing. So I was like, oh, okay. So it's okay then. Yeah, it's okay. So then I didn't immediately go and do anything. I sort of hung around, and I felt that the Father was saying, well, why are you hanging around? Yeah, because I was a bit like, really? Am I really going to go and do this? You know, and he then affirmed, look, you know how to do this. You know how to put this process in place. So for me, his affirmation was, I was now in agreement. I didn't have to go and brood over a long time. I was instantly in agreement because he had given me that affirmation that this was his purpose. And then I knew then that I could go and do it. Now, I didn't go to the chamber of creation and do it as I might have done differently. I felt I needed to go back to the guardians, and it was like I was definitely pregnant with this possibility, and I just released those guardians from that inner desire, and guardians formed. Quite a number of them formed, and but I'm not the sort of person who's going to create something in great detail, like, well, they're going to look like this and they're all going to be dressed like this or whatever. I knew what guardians look like, so it was like the function of the guardian was more my sort of thought. There needs to be guardians to guard portals. There aren't enough, so I've been asked to create some more. Then they could then be used as the guardians assigned them. They weren't my guardians, it's like there was no ownership of anything. It was just like, no, okay, yeah, I have permission to do this. They just were released from that creative desire, and there they were, and then off they went. When I went with some others, and I think it was Nancy and Justin and a few others, we were sort of engaging together, and I sort of shared the story. And Nancy was, I think, oh, can we go and do that again? Can we do some more? So I thought, well, I don't know, let's go and see if that's what the Father wants us to do. So we did, felt that. And of course, Nancy is very much more creative in the way she would do something. And so she was like, oh, you're creating these things, then she was describing what they look like and everything like that. And and it's great because that was her creative expression. We don't have to do it the same. Now, the end result was there were more guardians who could do more things, which was great. But the way we did it was an expression of the differences that we have as individual people, which is why I always want to ensure that whatever I do has integrity with who I am, that I'm not trying to do it like anybody else, or try and, oh, this worked last time, I'll do this again. I want each time to feel like, no, this is the creative process. Because someone who sat down at a canvas, who's a painter, is not going to paint exactly the same thing, although their strokes may be the same and they may use the same technique because that's how they paint, but what they're going to do is express something differently. And if they were to maybe paint a picture of an angel, maybe the next time they would paint a picture of the angel, it wouldn't look exactly the same. So I think the creative process that I go through just gives me some checks and balances to ensure this is going to be an expression of who I am, and then that can take place. So I don't try and make it become, because it can feel like a bit of a formula. Oh, I go and brood here, I go do this, I go and do that, oh, then I can go and do that. But it's much more of an interactive, creative process than just a formula of going step by step through a thing. And it creates in me opportunities for these checks and balances along the way, that I don't just brood and immediately say, come forth. Now, you might brood and immediately say, come forth. That's fine. You know, for me, I just feel there's things that help me along the process to be expressive of that, you know, in the way I do it. You know, and it gives me a little bit of time to go through that process. So it's not just rush for me. You know, I don't just think, oh, great, I'm going to go and do this right now. You know, it may be during a session I might do it, or it may be over a few days that I might do it, depending on, you know, what I feel and how I feel the urgency of it is. And sometimes this is something that God's desire for this to be birthed is totally integral with who I am. It's completely around something that I am involved in and is to do with my destiny and no one else's. So God has sort of inspired me with something which was sort of integral with my life and destiny, whereas other people may do things which are broader sometimes for other people and other things. Now, you know, I have done that as well, but I do feel there's a sense of, we don't have to rush it, and brooding itself is not a rushed process. Obviously, you know, it is a reflective coming into vibrating with the right frequency of God, you know. And when I first sit there, I might not be totally in sync, and my frequency has to entrain to his frequency for me to come into agreement and alignment with what his heart is for whatever, you know, I'm being inspired to engage and bring to birth. If you enjoy these videos, would you please take a moment to like, comment and subscribe? It really does help. Thank you very much.